Hello and welcome to the channel. I bought a 2001 Golf TDI with a blown turbo for $600 Canadian. After assessing the engine for damage and finding there was none as a result of the failed turbo, I wanted to figure out if buying a cheap VNT 15 turbo cartridge at $150 would be a worthwhile hack as opposed to shelling out over $750 on a brand new complete unit. We're going to look at two different eBay cartridges, compare them to an OEM cartridge, and install one and see if it'll hold up. The first one is Max Speeding Rods brand. This is the one that I bought first, which, spoiler alert, didn't fit, so I couldn't test it. However, I didn't give up, and the second one was also purchased off of eBay and it ended up working. But first, we'll look at the Max Speeding Rods cartridge and go over the installation process. As you can see here, I'm dumping sand out of my actuator. I take out the MightyVac hand pump and confirm that it's leaking, so I know I'll need to replace it. I put the cartridge into the compressor housing first, lining the bolt next to the outlet up to the left side bolt for the oil return and offsetting it a bit. The turbo I'm putting the cartridge into here, the original cartridge was fine, however it had sticky VNT vanes. It was cleared out of all the carbon, but it would still stick badly. Some people say that the VNT plates warp, but I don't believe that. What I found is there's tiny metal deposits that build up some of the fins that can be scraped off with a razor blade, so if you have this issue, try that out since it fixed it in my case. As you can see here, I dropped in the turbo and checked to make sure that the wheel still spins. Then I go and tighten the exhaust housing bolts all the way down. I check again, but the wheel does not move at all. So I take it off and reinstall the OEM cartridge to make sure there isn't some sort of installation error. After tightening it down, the OEM unit spins freely. Fast forwarding 2 weeks and I have a second turbo from eBay. It was supposedly made in Poland and it was much more expensive at $170 shipped. Here's a bit of side-by-side comparison. The shaft on the new one looks similar to OEM, it's a little bit longer than the Max Speeding Rods. The castings on the exhaust side are definitely different from the Max Speeding Rods and potentially a different compressor and turbine wheel setup. But strangely, the turbos share the exact same compressor backplate because the markings on the back of them are identical. This is when I caught on that this turbo likely isn't made in Poland, but rather assembled. So now, I'm going to demonstrate fitment into 3 different exhaust housings of varying conditions. The one in the middle had the exhaust turbine grind up against the housing, causing material loss. First, the OEM cartridge. As you can see, it spins freely in all of them like you would expect. Now the Max Speeding Rods turbo. In the first housing, the turbine wheel hits the housing before the cartridge housing can bottom out into the exhaust housing. It grinds when spinning without any bolts installed, and it seizes when there are bolts installed. Oddly enough, installing it into the damaged housing, the turbo actually spins freely. So this cartridge could potentially work, but due to the poor fitment, I don't want to find out how long it will last. The final housing replicates the same result as the first housing. As you can see, there are marks on the 2 undamaged housings from grinding the wheel up against it. However, there are none to be found on the damaged housing. Lastly is the new eBay cartridge. The first housing, it spins perfect, and I knew right away it was going to work. The impeller spins like an OEM unit, or better, unlike the Max Speeding Rods. I've used Max Speeding Rods products before with good success, but their turbochargers are a hit and miss. They include a card that reads they will respond to you within 48 hours on issues regarding their products. So I sent them an email. It's been 1 month and they have not stepped in to do anything or even respond. Getting back to the part where I said I was ripped off, I managed to find the exact turbo the eBay seller was selling for $100 shipped off AliExpress. I was able to confirm that it was the exact match based off the photos and based off the turbo balancing sheet I received. The eBay seller claimed that Code in Poland manufactured this turbo. Either Code is pulling a fast one on the eBay seller, or more likely the eBay seller is lying about the manufacturer, so the buyer believes that they are not getting a Chinese product. I believe it is that way because of lack of Code labeling as pictured on Code's website, and that Code likely rebrands the Chinese turbos as well. So here I'm bolting up the new turbocharger cartridge to the compressor housing, and I'm going to be installing the VNT vane assembly. So I start off by sorting out all the vanes, pointing outwards of course. Then I go ahead and install the screws and the circular standoffs on the bottom. There are 2 different heights, So the larger ones go on the bottom side and the smaller ones go on the top side. After that, I install the VNT mechanism. Make sure you know where the actuator lever is and bolt it in accordingly to where the turbo cartridge is going to sit. Now make sure that all the VNT vanes can point outwards. As you can see here, these ones were stuck, so I just wiggled them around. But generally they can also get stuck on the bolts, so just make sure they're all good. Install the VNT ring just by sliding it around and moving the pegs into position. The next step is to put the smaller circular sliders on and then put the pegs through them. Then I tighten the bolts and install the cartridge in there. I gave it a few taps and it sat down to the bottom. Reinstalling the bolts was difficult because they were very rusted and a normal size wrench wouldn't fit on them a lot of the times. So I had to use a chisel and a hammer to install either a 3/8 12-point wrench or a 8mm or a 9mm wrench. After that, I just made sure that the VNT mechanism was working, and then I went ahead and adjusted the mechanism. I used needle nose pliers to free up the mechanism so I could spin it by hand, adjusted it, and used the mighty vacuum to confirm that it was working. So, does this eBay VNT Turbo Cartridge actually work? The answer is yes. My car is a Stage 1 tune and has 205 injectors, and it goes pretty good. Stay tuned and subscribe for a high mileage update. But for now, I have 4,000 hard kilometers on it.